And good evening again, Eternal Kernels. I started talking with my mic muted. That figures. My name is Dan McBride, and I want to welcome you to the Eternal Kernel Virtual Pub Crawl. Tonight is night 3 as we make our stroll down memory lane and remember some of those great night spots that you might remember adding to your Eastern experience when you were a student on the campus. Beautiful. We started Monday night. We talked about Specs and some of the places in the 60s, the great music scene with the Maroons and the Exiles, which later became Exile. Last night, we journeyed into the 70s. We talked about Poopy-Otsies, The Bear and the Bull, Dirty Ernie's, The Magic Moment, Zanzibar. And then tonight, we get to the 1980s. And there are a lot of places to talk about in the 1980s. In my opinion, that's kind of when downtown really took off and really boomed. And we're going to spend our first hour focusing on the family dog. And there's not many places I go where at least one alum doesn't bring up the dog, and they remember a lot of great times at the dog. And we're excited tonight. David Embry, who worked as a manager at the dog and Paco's and the Top Dog, he's going to be with us tonight. Also, Morgan Robinson Varney is going to be with us. And Morgan is the daughter of Gene and Robbie Robinson, who owned the family dog. And she's got some great stories and some history of the restaurant and the bar that she's going to share with us tonight. In the second hour, we're going to talk about J. Sutter's Mill, another one of those legendary places on Main Street in downtown Richmond. Billy Luxon, the owner and operator of that establishment, will join us tonight in hour 2. So it's going to be a great night. We'll talk about some of the other spots in the 80s too. Again, I want to remind you, we only have a limited time and we could only feature a few bars. We talked to our alumni board and we said, what are some of the places that you remember specifically about your time at EKU? And so we tried to feature some of those spots, but we'll try to talk about as many of them as we can. And we may do this again. And if we didn't hit your favorite night spot during this go around, then we will certainly try to do it on the next go around. A couple of things that I would like to ask you to do tonight as you're watching. First of all, we want to know who you are and where you are. So if you would take a moment and check in with us at alumni.eku.edu/pubcrawl, alumni.eku.edu/pubcrawl. Go there, check in, let us know that you tuned in tonight. And also, we've got a really cool Pub Crawl t-shirt. It's not an official event unless you have a t-shirt. So we've got the Eternal Kernel Pub Crawl t-shirt that is available for you to purchase. And it's certainly going to be a collector's item for sure. You can go there and do that. And also, we have an opportunity, if you'd like to support the students who are currently here at EKU, an opportunity for you to make a donation to the university as well. So please go in and do that before the night is over. We also want to remind you folks who are watching live on Facebook, on the Facebook live stream, if you have a memory or you have a particular thing about one of the establishments we're talking about tonight, feel free to jump in there in the chat and talk about it. If you have a question for some of our guests, put that in the chat and I'll be sure to try to pass that along. We want this to be something that everybody shares in and we all participate in. And I know a lot of the folks who are tuned in tonight have some great memories. So with that, that's our introduction. Let's get on to the show. And like I said, we first of all, Jeff Gillum, who many of you colonels know out there, Jeff was a bartender at the Family Dog and went on to own several of his establishments and still operates Gillum's here in town. Jeff was scheduled to be with us tonight. Jeff spent the day with his son at Natural Bridge, and unfortunately, they had got stuck in traffic and had not made it back in time to be with us tonight. So we're going to miss out on having Jeff here, but we do have two great guests. I mentioned earlier, Morgan Robinson Varney is with us tonight. Morgan is the daughter of Gene and Robbie Robinson, who owned and operated the dog. Morgan, good evening. Welcome for being, or thanks for being here.
Hi, Dan. Thank you for having me.
And we have another guest who actually is in the family as well. David Embry is with us tonight. David is up in northern Kentucky, and David worked at the dog for a number of years, managed and operated, and was part of the crew there, I guess, pretty much for a lot of the time that it was open. David, good evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I also want to mention both of you are EKU alums. That's great news. And this is kind of part of our alumni programming for homecoming. And so we appreciate you being here. Morgan, I'm going to start with you. And, I think about people talking about growing up Brady, and you have grown up a Robinson. And so the family dog is such a big part of the Robinson family. And what's it like? I'm sure you've heard stories for your entire life from mom and dad about the family dog.
Everywhere we go, especially if one of our family members is wearing a dog t-shirt, someone stops and says, "Is that the family dog?" I mean, we've had people stop Tennessee, Florida, and say, "Is that the family dog in Richmond, Kentucky?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it is." So, I mean, everybody around us has told us stories, different things. It's never ending. It's funny, especially growing up. I went to model, so right on EKU's campus, and I wore a dog t-shirt to school one day. It just said dog on it. It didn't, have the logo or anything. And my teacher said, "Is that Dog the Bounty Hunter?" And I said, "No, that's the family dog. My parents used to own it." And he said, "I went there numerous times. Don't tell me." Okay. So it's been a lifetime full of stories, interesting stories, fun times, and it's been fun. So.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. The question I hear a lot is, where did the name come from? How did they decide to name it the family dog?
So I just really learned the whole story last night when I was trying to get information for you all. My dad followed the Grateful Dead very, very closely, and they were doing jam sessions with a couple of different popular artists at the time, and it was a concert hall that they used to jam at a lot. It was called the Family Dog Concert Hall out in California. And my dad read this article and he said, that's a great name for a bar. So he brought it to Richmond, Kentucky, and it stuck.
It definitely has stuck.
That's the same story I got from Robbie. So that follows through and through because it came out of California, and like she said, it stuck. It was a great name, and Robbie brought that to Richmond, and it's a great thing.
Now, David, talk a little bit about your role and your association with the dog, because I know you did a little bit of everything.
I did. I remember seeing live bands at the Top Dog because they had live music up there. I actually lived with Robbie and Jean because I came from a broken home and lived on the top floor of the family dog as a kid, which is kind of interesting because, as a kid, I used to out the window drop balloons, water balloons on the crowd standing outside. So, that's a great memory. And, there's maybe a few people that remember that, but I actually grew up in that building. And then we started doing live music up there called the Top Dog. And then eventually it turned into a Italian place called Fido's, which had great Italian food. And it was a spin-off on the Mexican food at Paco's on the bottom floor. So Robbie and Jean had a great idea about having, Mexican and Italian, mixed in, and then, the party place at the dog. And, it was a party place. It was a dance club. I started DJing there at a very young age that I probably should not disclose. But I was a disc jockey there, and, Gene taught me how to spin records. And it was back when there were records. It was really fun. It was a blast. I mean, it was just a place to come and have a great time. And, to play the music there was just phenomenal because you kind of understood how to get a crowd to react to what music you're playing. And that's a time that I'll never forget because, you could get a crowd hopping and jumping and partying, just from the music alone. And, that was so much fun for me. And it was such a great experience.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned dropping the water balloons down on the crowd because the dog crowd probably loved that. It probably played, right along with what they were there to do was have a good time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, I can remember, Jean, my aunt, getting on me about it, and you know, scolding us for it, but at the same time, kind of snickering under her breath. Oh, it really was. It really was a time to remember, and I'm glad I have that memory.
That building obviously started as Specs and then became the steakhouse for a little while and then became the dog. Morgan, what can you tell us about how Gene and Robbie decided to get into the bar business and to pick that location?
Absolutely. So my dad bought the building in 1974. It's February of 74. And then he bought the building while the steakhouse was still in it. In August of 74, I believe I'm remembering this right, he actually bought the business. So that's when it changed over to the dog. And my parents weren't together yet. My dad actually met my mom in August while she was playing, in that August of that year, while she was playing pinball, of all things. I'm sure you all can remember the pinball machines. And a mutual friend introduced them, and they've been together ever since. So,
so that's even a bigger part of the story. I mean, not only did they own this place for so long, but that's where their romance and their love story began.
It is. It is.
And I got to interject there because as a kid, because Gene and Robbie were so gracious to take me in, as a young person with a divorced family. We used to play pinball machines. I used to play pinball machines there, and the pinball vendor would let Gene and Robbie paint the quarters red so they could get them back. So I would use red quarters to play the pinball machine, and it wouldn't cost us anything because Robbie and Gene would get them back.
It's a profit deal. I like that.
Yeah.
So Morgan, go on. So they met there, and that's where it started. And what made Robbie decide he wanted to be in the bar business?
So my grandfather owned a bar in Lexington, and he grew up around that scene. So my grandfather owned the CCI, which is the Chevy Chase Inn in Lexington, and ran it for a long time. My dad's been around that business for basically his whole life. So, he decided that he wanted to do it, and he did it really, really well. When it first started, the dog was only one floor. It was that middle floor, just live music at the time. No DJing at that time. It was 1974, so things were kind of changing a little bit. And then they moved, kind of expanded to that top space. And like David said, when it was just the middle floor, they were living up there. So it's like a big apartment, which I think is really cool. You don't have to walk very far to home at the end of the night. Upstairs. And then they transitioned it. The top dog had all of the live music. So I was talking to them last night, and that was definitely done on purpose. You have these students who, a lot of them want to listen to the live music. A lot of them want to dance and have the disco. And that's what they had on the middle floor. So I think it really plays into why, it was such a popular place, because you've got a couple of options there. You don't have to go listen to the live band if you don't want to, or you can go upstairs and dance with a live band if you do want to. So I think that was a really smart decision on their part.
Absolutely. And like David said, I think obviously they made great business decisions all the way through this because it was incredibly popular and successful. But even when they switched to food in the downstairs and upstairs, they were very strategic about it and had two different styles of food. So they kind of had something for everyone. Right.
And at the bottom floor, let me flip to my notes here because Dad gave me the correct date so I would not mess it up. In the bottom floor was a place called Marshall's at one time too that had family cooking. So that was another business that was within the building. And that was from 78 to 80. So there was a little bit of transition period there. Then it turned into the Underdog Saloon, if I'm remembering correctly, in 1980. And that had some food. Is that right? So it had like pub food.
Yeah.
And then from '82 to 2000, it was Paco's in the bottom. And then Fido's in the top was from '86 to '88. So there was always an option for somebody to go there, you know.
And Morgan, it really joys me because I forgot about the Underdog Saloon in Marshall's, because as a kid I ate there, and what I always ate was a club sandwich. And then I remember a guy there. We had a jam up on the soft serve machine, and the guy stuck his finger up the soft serve machine, and it took it off. And
it fixed it.
yeah, Gene and Robbie drove him down to Louisville with that finger in an ice bath and had it reattached.
Oh my
Unbelievable.
goodness.
And it worked. They got it reattached.
Yeah. Gene, do you remember who that was?
David.
David
Somebody.
David somebody.
David Bug.
David Bug, she said.
Bug. It was Bug. Yeah, she's right. It was Bug. We called him Bug.
Well, it's funny because you talk about people remembering the dog and talking about the dog everywhere. Paco's had an incredibly strong following itself.
Absolutely.
And I have people who come back to town now and say, gosh, I hate that Paco's is not here anymore.
Well, kudos to Gene and Robbie. Gene especially, the recipes that were there were so solid, even to this day. Because I'm an avid cook as well, but even to this day, I can't match some of the things that she has done. Even with Fido's, the breadsticks and the spaghetti sauce and lasagna that she had up there at Fido's. She just being mean, or I don't know what, but I just can't figure it out.
And we should mention, David, you're still into food business, David. You're at the University of Cincinnati feeding tons of college students all the time.
5,000, 6,000 a day.
And you even owned your own bar or restaurant for a while, didn't you?
Actually, I did, and we don't really want to go there because it was a costly situation.
All right, we'll just move along. Anyway, we're here to talk about the dog and Paco's and all of that tonight. Talk a little bit about, if you will, Morgan, some of the reasons that you think, and maybe your mom and dad have shared with you, what it was about the dog that was made it so popular.
I think just from my experience too, over the years where people have talked, the staff was one of the most important things. I mean, to them and to the business. I mean, they played into Greek life. They played with, into the football players, had football players and a lot of students in Greek life working for them. And if you like where you work, you're going to bring your friends along. And that's exactly what happened. And my parents treated them like family. I mean, they not only would they have staff pictures every year, which are still in there, they had staff parties. So they'd all, come over to my house. My mom would cook for them. They had a pool, played games, softball, stuff like that. So it really was like a community almost and a family unit. And I have people contact me on Facebook. Hey, is your mom on here? Is your dad on here? I used to work for them. Can you tell them I said hello, or can we connect? And I think, for it being so many years later, that's really saying something, that you still want to be in contact with your boss from college,
And Dan, I got to interject there because I was a huge part of that. Gene and Robbie, they had a nice setup out at their house with, like Morgan said, a pool. We had a basketball court, a softball field, and really a pavilion that had a bar service. I mean, every Sunday we did this religiously. Every Sunday we went out there, and I'll never forget it in my life, how much fun it was to just gather with the staff, and Morgan's correct in the fact that it was a family. It was the family dog, and we all went out there and had a good time together and played softball, played volleyball. We had a volleyball court, played basketball, swam. I mean, it was the most amazing time of my life, and I'll never forget it.
I mean, my first babysitter came from the dog. I was in her wedding. Like, it really was a family unit. Like, we are not exaggerating. So I think that's one of the main things that made it so successful.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, David.
You just gotta, you don't see that in today's society of a community coming together like that, and an employer taking care of people like Robbie and Jean did, because they were unlike any other. And I absolutely realize that now, as a man in his 50s. Unbelievable. I just, I so hope they understand how much I appreciated it. Being part of the family was another thing, but just having so many people involved in that. And Robbie was adamant about having a yearly picture of the group. And you just can't, it just doesn't happen now. And we did something back then, or Robbie and Jean did something back then that I feel like will never be done again, because I just don't think that that's where we are.
Yeah, and you mentioned Facebook a minute ago, Morgan, and I did want to mention that there is a Family Dog Facebook page, and it's got how many? A bunch of members, right?
I don't know. Over 1,300, Mom says.
Over 1,300.
Mom posts pictures on there pretty regularly. People are always on there telling stories. So if you're interested, go on there and look at the stories or add your own, because I know I like reading them. I know Mom and Dad do too. So definitely go on there and look. And
there was a period where I guess you could say there was some national prominence that came to the Family Dog.
There was. So one night, my dad watches a lot of TV sometimes, and he was flipping through the channels, and I don't remember what it was on. I don't remember exactly which station it was on, but they were talking, I think it was a sports station or something, and they were talking about it. They were talking about the dog, about the dime draft at the dog. That's what it was. And he said,
on Fridays.
Yes. I mean, to be sitting, in your home and turn on the TV and hear that, that's not even anywhere around here. So I think it's pretty amazing.
Somebody wanted to know what happened to all of the dog composites.
They are still there. They're still on the walls, still in good shape. Everything's, I'm in a couple of them. So my husband and I go in there, and look at them and take pictures of them. We'll have to get on there and start adding more pictures to the Facebook page so you all can see those.
And it's funny because I've heard people say that if you walked into the dog today, it's pretty much like it was the night it closed, that you guys have kind of left it.
It is. There's a few missing records. My brother's gone in there and swiped a few of those nice records, I think. But, other than that, the pictures are still there. All the bar signs are there. It really is a time capsule, and I'm lucky to be able to see that.
And the dance floor still works.
The dance floor still works.
The dance floor still works?
Still works. Lights up. We go in there and check it every once in a while, look at it. It's pretty cool. Like David said, that you just don't see stuff like that anymore. It's almost like a novelty when you go in there, because it's not something you see every day.
Well, it would be neat for us to do an alumni event there sometime. We should plant that seed with Mom and Dad. That would be a fun thing to do.
Might take some convincing. I'll do my best.
No,
go ahead, David.
So many great memories there. That dance floor, which was a novel dance floor that had drop down lighting on the floor, which in fact, when I saw it back then, I'd never seen it before, and you don't really see it again. Maybe if you watch uh, that movie with Staying Alive. I don't know, what was that movie?
For Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah, Saturday Night Fever. You see it on Saturday Night Fever, and that's kind of, I think, where that, well, Robbie got that idea. I don't know, but he did it the right way, because I can remember I painted the inside of those damn things. They were white, and I had to. He always had me doing stuff like that. I painted the inside of the little walls of the channels of those lights, and then you put the light bulbs in, the colored light bulbs in. Then it had plexiglass over it, and that was the dance floor. But pretty amazing that, I love having this conversation with you guys, because it brings up those memories of things that, I've forgotten and am happy to remember.
Yeah, and let's. We have a photo here that you guys. Either one of you know when this was taken or have memories of it? David, you're probably in it, aren't you?
1978. Is it 78? You can't see it.
No, that's an early one, 75, I think.
Mom thinks 75.
Yeah,
75.
And then just to be noted, I believe Gene painted that mural of the dogs on the side of the building. Am I right, Gene?
The round one, yeah.
The round.
The round.
Yes. Yeah, because I remember that. I'm probably tucked in there somewhere, but I do remember that picture.
That's a great picture.
See, Mom.
And that's
He's on the
that's how I remember the dog right there. Is that shot, that view.
I sneaked out of that fire escape many times.
Now, you mentioned the dime draft. I think it was on Fridays. Were there any other drink specials or signature things that the dog was famous for that you guys may remember?
Oh yeah, there was Drink and Drowned. There was I can't remember the where we did quarter, where drinks went from a quarter up to 75 cents each hour, and and then at the end of the night they were the cheapest. So I mean, it was Drink Fest back then. I mean, that's what it was about. It was about cheap drinks and everybody having a good time. But yeah, I remember that Drink and Drowned, the dime draft. The Drink and Drown was a big thing, and then it was until someone had to go to the bathroom, because we had someone tend the bathroom. Once someone went to the bathroom, the special was over.
I add one thing about my parents have always talked about the end of the night, making sure that everyone goes home in a good mood. And my dad and my mom have talked endlessly about the music that they would play at the end of the night. So it was always something fun, even something as what did you say that they like, the hokey pokey, or something fun to end the night to. And I think that's something different that most places don't do. You've got a closing song, but you don't ever, hear something goofy like that. Something that sing along songs is what Mom's saying. So
agreed. And Gene obviously, taught me that. I mean, we would, we would play songs at the end of the night that were, tying up the night and making people leave in a good mood. And, Morgan's right when she says that, that's what it was built around. You think back on it now, I didn't realize then, what she was really doing. And really that's Jean's attribute. I mean, she is the one that really fabricated and made that part of the process of that business, that towards the end of the night, you want to make everyone leave and feel good about when they're leaving. And we always wanted people to be safe, but it's just that was a time where there wasn't so much um, police involvement, or however you want to say it. They pretty much let everybody kind of do what they wanted to do, but people were just more conscientious of the neighbor, and she did a great job in having our disc jockeys do a great job in making people feel good when they leave.
That's one important thing. I mean, my mom trained all the DJs. That's really not cool to say that your mom was a DJ, but she was. She trained all the DJs. And I think, she wasn't professionally trained. She figured it out herself. And for any place you go, music is a big part of what makes it fun. So like I said before, I think having all those options of, different food places, different kinds of music to listen to is just what made it one of the most popular spots, in my opinion.
And on that, Morgan, I remember as a kid, whenever Robbie would tell me that I did a good job DJing that night, that was one of the statements that made me feel so good, because he knew that I took hold of the place and got the vibe of it, and that's what Gene taught me. But to have Robbie tell me I did a good job was icing on the cake.
He still talks about all of his good DJs. So, I know what you're saying. It was a very important thing to him. So I know what you're talking about there.
One of the things that I have learned this week is, we had, I learned that Jack Bricking, who had Pupiazzi, started as a bartender at Specs. Last night, Willie Joe Covington, who opened the Magic Moment, started his life working for Specs. Jeff Gillum, who has opened several establishments around here, started as a bartender at the Dog. And I think, I'm sure there are other people who worked at the Dog who went on to open their own places. It was kind of a launching pad and a training ground for folks who wanted to get into the restaurant or bar business.
There's no doubt about that. There were so many components, with the Pacos and Fido's and the Top Dog. You had live music, you had dance club, you had dining. There were that's where I've made my business. I'm a director of operations, at the University of Cincinnati, and it started there. Hell, my facility is a $32 million facility. I started at a place like that, and here I am running a $30 million facility.
Well, it was clearly a great training ground. I saw Bobby Scannell made a quote a minute ago. Bobby was a former football player at EKU. Jeff, of course, played football at EKU. And I think over the years, there were a lot of the football players who either were bouncers or worked at the club, or obviously who were there hanging out at the club. They all loved it.
Yeah, Mom wants me to let you all know they were let in free too. So it's probably a reason why they kept coming back too.
Yeah,
yes.
And, I'm sorry Jeff's not on there, because I got a story about him that I wouldn't share with you all, but I'd love to bring up to him.
Just to let him know you remember it, right?
Exactly. All I got to say is white pants, baby.
Oh, dear.
That's all we need to hear.
I do think there were more pictures that we could see, because I know my parents have pictures, but it's not like it is today. You can go somewhere and take a quick video and a picture and save it. So I do wish there was more of photographic evidence of, just the crowds and stuff like that. Because I remember, Mom and Dad have talked about the lines going down the block and turning around, and just.
Man, you ain't kidding, because I remember that. That sidewalk was about 6 feet wide, and it would be full all the way down. Up and down, because it used to go down, then it got too long, so you had to go up. I'm talking 300 people in line. Unbelievable.
And I remember, and that's why I always say I think the 80s and maybe even into the early 90s, but that was the heyday of downtown because I can remember as a kid driving through downtown Richmond and it felt like you were at Myrtle Beach on spring break or something because the dog was going, Sutter's was going, O'Reilly's was going. There were lines to get into all three
Yeah.
of them. First Street had stuff going, and people were out in the street walking back and forth, almost stopping traffic, just like you see on spring break.
And
No,
you know, Dan, the great thing about this is that I was such a brat that, you know, Robbie and Gene took care of me. I could bring 4 or 5 friends and break that line and walk them right in. And that was a big deal. I mean, back then, that was a big deal.
That made you a popular person, I bet.
Absolutely.
I remember, you know, driving. My grandmother used to live in town, and my mom would always take me to her house while they went to work. And I remember the amount of people walking around and just, you know, it wasn't ever a bad thing. It wasn't ever like anyone was up to trouble or, you know, being too drunk in the street or something. It was just people gathering and having a good time. And I really wish, you know, it was still like that. It's just, you know, like you said, it's just not that way anymore.
And you're right, Morgan. And I remember back at that time, you know, as a teenager and, you know, as a, you know, early 20-year-old, it's a damn shame that it can't be like that now. But it was a different time. And it was, you know, I so appreciate it when I look back on it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of kind of what we're doing this week. We started in the 60s, and those people who remember Specs wish they could go back to that time. And the people who remember the dog in the 80s want to go back to that time. And we'll talk to people in a couple of nights who remember jerseys in 2017 or whatever and want to go back to that. You know, I mean, everything's a little bit different today. I do want to go back, though, and touch on a little bit more on Paco's because we just kind of brushed over Paco's a little bit. And it was such a big part of that establishment and the Richmond food scene for a while. And let's talk about some of the food that Paco's had, some of the features there, some of the things, David, that you remember that made Paco's what it was.
Well, the number one thing was the beef mammut.
I knew that.
It was a huge burrito with chili on top and, you know, cheese and all that. That was one of the things I remember. I personally really liked the chicken flautas. That was my favorite. That was, you know, once again, most of those recipes are Gene's. But it was 2 tortillas, tortillas wrapped with chicken and cheese and then deep fried and then covered in queso sauce and topped with lettuce and tomato. That was one of my favorite items. But man, I can remember, and you know, probably more times than Gene wants to know. You know, I would go in there after hours and make food for myself because I lived in their other building, which they had it's called Cherries. I don't know if you didn't bring that up, but Cherries,
no, I remember.
a live entertainment venue, huge building, like a warehouse. And I lived above that for many years. And I could walk from there to Paco's because it's just another street up. But yeah, I would say the beef mammut is a big deal. And then the nachos were a big deal because the beans were made with lard, which, you know, made the taste of it and the flavor of it. But, you know, they would put those nachos together and, you know, throw the beans on it and the beef and the cheese. And then, like I said, the flautas and the beef mammut.
Yeah, Mom said the chimichangas were the best seller, but everyone that I talk to talks about that mammut. Everybody wants Mom to make them one, and I'm like, well, I'll tell her.
Well, and, another thing, I was talking with Randy White, who's on our alumni board and played baseball at EKU, and he worked at Paco's for a while. And, the thing that we talked about is, and it was the same for the dog, and even upstairs, there was nothing fancy about any of these places. They were just, it was an older building, and none of it was really flashy or fancy. It was, it was just booths and tables and chairs, and it wasn't highfalutin at all.
Oh, it was all about the food, man. I'm telling you, Jean is a genius when it comes to the food. She made great Italian food and great Mexican food. Unbelievable on all those. And that's some old shit you got posted right there. That's some old shit. But that Paco dude, he lasted. He was always there.
He did last for a long time. Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned cherries, and I didn't even know that they had cherries. Was the dog in that area and cherries, was that it? Or were there other establishments that Robbie and Jean had?
It was the next block over. And, Robbie had this idea, and I hope he's not thinking I'm misspeaking, but because he had that live music venue on the Top Dog, he wanted to expand on that. And then they opened that place, which was huge. The thing had to be, I don't know, 5,000, 6,000 square feet. And then I remember Jean, because she's got some artistic ability, she used a projector to put the Cherries emblem on the wall. Mm-hmm. I remember when she was doing it. I remember it. And it was from the album Play That Funky Music Right.
Wild Cherry.
Wild Cherry. And it had the lips with the teeth biting on it, and she projected that on the wall and freaking painted it. Amazing.
There was a car on the other side too. I think it was a 57 Chevy on the other side too that she painted.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had that, and then they owned the Chevy Chase Inn for a while in Lexington after my grandfather did. And then you had the College Station liquor store at one point too, which was Pally's for a long time. So definitely they had a lot. And were successful. So I guess it worked,
Yeah. And so when exactly did the dog end up closing?
So 2000 was when it closed.
And did they all close at once? Did Paco's close at the same time the dog did, or did it stay open a little bit longer?
Paco's was open a little bit longer than the dog was, but I can't remember what year did Paco's close. I'm sure Dad could tell us, but I don't remember right offhand. But yeah, it wasn't all at the same time. Dog first and then Paco's.
Yeah. And then the restaurant upstairs was only open for a short time, right?
It was. So let me look at my dates here. So Fido's upstairs was from 86 to 88. So, you all still had food upstairs, right? So they still had food in the Top Dog. It just wasn't the full restaurant anymore, if that makes sense.
But I got to tell you, Dan, man, that Italian food that Jean had upstairs at Fido's was the best.
It was good. I ate there several times. We used to go there when I was doing football games on the radio at the end of football practice. Tuck Woolham and Doug Carter and some of the football coaches and Weber Hamilton and I, we would go up to the Top Dog and eat after football practice because the food was so good.
It was just so hard because it was so secluded and out of the way that it didn't really catch on like it should have, because it should have caught on better. It just didn't flourish like it should have.
Yeah, it was a little bit dark up there, and certainly not like Paco's was. And Paco's being on the basement was obviously. And I assume over the years you guys had water issues at Paco's, just like everybody on Water Street did.
Oh, it's Water Street.
Yeah,
that's part of it.
Yeah. Well, we're getting close to the end of our hour, so I just want to again thank both of you for being here and give you an opportunity as we look back. Are there any final thoughts? And Morgan, let's start with you. Anything that your parents and you had talked about? Anything that we want to make sure we mention and talk about?
I just think one of the most important things is the music. I think it's so interesting to look how it changed over time. You know, you went from just having live bands, and I watched the special on Specs too, and a lot of the same bands played at the Dog that played at Specs. You know, you had the Techniques and Exile. And then I just think it's so neat how it changed from, you know, just live music to a combination of both. And I wish, like I said before, that we could see videos of those disco era, you know, dance times, because I think it'd be so interesting to look at. But I think, you know, the atmosphere, the staff, and the music are what really made that place so memorable and so popular with the college crowd.
David?
And Dan, I got to say, because I grew up in that place from the age of 12 to 25, that Facebook ain't got shit on the Family Dog. Because that place right there, you know, you had to actually contact people and talk to them. It wasn't, you know, all this, you know, techno shit, you know, where you had to do tech. You had to go out and actually talk to somebody. And that was the meeting place of all time, period.
Yeah. Well, it definitely was certainly a different time back then. And technology has changed everything for all of us. Guys, really, I want to thank you. It's been a fun hour. I've loved hearing these stories, and I'm sure many of our alums who are tuned in tonight have enjoyed hearing them. And Morgan, thank your mom and dad for sharing those memories with you. David, thanks for taking time to be with us tonight. And I know that you've helped bring back a lot of memories for a lot of folks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right. See you.
Thanks a lot. See you guys. So that's the Family Dog as we take our journey back through the decades with our virtual pub crawl. A couple things again I want to remind you about. If you're watching tonight on Facebook Live, please make sure you go over and check in with us at alumni.eku.edu/pubcrawl. Also, you'll get a chance there. You can find the virtual pub crawl t-shirt, and if you'd like to order one of those, you can do that. It's got logos from many of the places that we've been talking about tonight and throughout the week. And I want to remind you, coming up tomorrow night, we will talk about the 90s. And our feature places tomorrow night, first hour, we're going to talk about T-bombs. And the second hour, we're going to talk about Tazwells. And of course, we'll mention a lot of other places from the 1990s, but those will be our two feature establishments for tomorrow night. We have a second hour, or second segment coming up tonight that will start in just a few minutes. We're going to bring Billy Luxon back. Billy was with us on Monday night talking about his memories with the Exiles and playing at Specs. And as Morgan said, the Exiles even went up through the steakhouse and to the Family Dog eventually. But Billy is one of those folks who later got into the business and the restaurant and the bar business. And we're going to talk about his time with J. Sutter's Mill, another one of those classic spots that was located on Main Street here in Richmond. So take a minute and take a break. And if you need to go to the restroom, do that. If you need to get a drink, do that. And we'll come back in just a few moments with Billy Luxon, and we'll talk about J. Sutter's Mill on the virtual pub crawl from EKU alumni. And good evening, and welcome back to our second segment tonight of the EKU Eternal Kernel virtual pub crawl. And for those of you who are able to join us for our first segment talking about the family dog, we appreciate it. Thanks for coming back for segment 2. I am going to mention for those who are just now tuning in that, again, we are making a little trip down memory lane and talking about some of those iconic night spots that may have been part of your EKU experience. Some of those establishments, from Specs to Pupiazzi's to the Family Dog, and we'll go all the way into the 90s tomorrow and into the 2000s on Friday night when we wrap up our virtual pub crawl. Again, if you are tuning in on Facebook Live, a couple things we'd like to tell you. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to post that in the chat area on Facebook Live. Some of them, as you may have seen, will be shared live here on the stream. Some of them I will be able to pass on to our guests and maybe get a question answered for you if you have one, or share a memory that you may have. We also want you to check in tonight by going to alumni.eku.edu/pubcrawl and let us know where you are. We're interested to find out, alums from all over the country, where you are and that you're tuning in and catching it tonight. And also, we want you to check out the EKU Eternal Kernel Pub Crawl t-shirt that we have available. It's going to be a collector's item, has the logos from a lot of the establishments that we're talking about this week on the back. And if you go to the site there, you'll be able to check it out and possibly get one of those if you would like. So we are going to shift now and move to our number 2. And we're going to bring back a guest. This is only repeat guest we're going to have all week, but it's really because he's had an interesting career and an interesting life here in Richmond and has been a part of so many different things. And when I talk to people about the history of Richmond, and in particularly downtown Richmond, I don't think anybody has as good a recollection and knows as much about it as our guest tonight. He was with us on Monday night talking about his time with the Exiles and some of the music scene that went through Specs back then. But tonight he's going to come on and talk to us about one of his establishments, which was J. Sutter's Mill. And we are very happy to have Billy Luxon back with us tonight. We welcome Billy into the show. Hey, Billy.
Hey, Dan, how are you? You're making me
great.
Old and wise. I'm not wise, just old.
Well, that's 1 out of 2 ain't bad, you know.
That's right.
Again, I want to thank you for coming back. You were with us on Monday night. We had a good time Monday night.
We did.
And I think there's some fun stuff to talk about. And I want to get to Sutter's, but since we're coming out of this segment with Jay Sutter's, or with the Family Dog, and because I know you have as good a memory as just about anybody about that era for downtown Richmond. The Dog was booming. O'Reilly's was booming. Sutter's was booming. I mean, it was really kind of the late 80s and into the early 90s was kind of the heyday, I feel like.
You know, there were actually, at one time I counted, and I believe there were 15 college bars in a 3-block area downtown. So it was really a drawing card. You know, all those places encouraged people from all over this whole area to come to Richmond.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before. Thursday night kind of turned into the local night where the EKU students would go, because Fridays and Saturdays you would have so many kids coming from the other colleges, UK and Center and all over, even Moorhead and further away. They would come to Richmond to flock for the nightlife.
They did, and they came in droves.
Yes, they did.
You were right when you said that it looked like Daytona Beach on Thursday night, because it really did. It was a festive party atmosphere.
Yes, it was. You know, and obviously there are a lot of benefits for a city like Richmond, the income, the tax boost. When you got that many places that are thriving and doing well, it certainly would be a boost to the local economy to have that many people come in on a given night or weekend.
Absolutely. You know, and I think at some point the city wishes they had that back.
Yeah.
You
well,
know,
and it's certainly,
yeah,
it's different now.
It is. It is. There's not a lot to do anymore.
Yeah. And you know, cities and things and places evolve and change. And, you know, that's part of life. And we all understand and get that. And frankly, the memories we have of some of that stuff are probably even better because there's nothing to compare it to now. But let's talk a little bit about J. Sutter's, because this is one that I find fascinating. And for folks who are tuning in who may not remember, because the building is no longer there, where Sutter's used to be is now the post office.
Post
right?
office. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of tell me how J. Sutter's Mill got started and where it came from.
Well, back in about the mid 70s, actually 73, 74, my brother actually delivered beer on a beer route. And he kept telling me, you know, we need to see if we can't find a location downtown. Back in those days, Richmond was divided into precincts, and only certain precincts were wet and allowed to serve alcoholic beverages. And that downtown area of that 3 or 4 blocks there was in the wet zone. So if you were going to open an establishment, it had to be within that boundary. And so a place became open. This was in the old Goodyear store. It had first been a Kroger store, and then Goodyear. And Goodyear was building their building out on the bypass. And we knew it was going to become vacant. And I was still in the band at the time with Exile. And we were going through transitions in the band, and a couple of the original members had left. And when this opportunity became available, you know, I had a decision. I thought, you know, am I going to rock and roll the rest of my life, or am I going to try to start a business and, you know, go in a different direction? So I did decide to do that. And we started remodeling that. And then I guess it was about December of 75, we opened as a restaurant, full service restaurant and discotheque. And then from there on, it transitioned a little bit over the years, but we were there until 92. And then we sold it to another operator who continued on for another 8 or 10 years with it as J. Sutter's Mill.
Yeah. And I think around 2000, around there was when pretty much a lot of the spots that the traditional spots just went away and things changed, and the laws changed. And
yes, that's right. And so he basically didn't renew his lease, and then we sold the building. So
yeah, and well now, and even after you sold Sutter's, you and Kenny you still had the liquor business a couple doors up, right?
We had a liquor store called Go Rush Liquors that was 3 doors up the street. We also had another operation called Frankenstein's, which was basically hot dogs and beer and other types of snack food. And we had that open for about 4 years. And the problem I ran into, I actually had someone wanting to franchise that. And sounded great to me at the time, but when we started checking the legality, MGM had Frankenstein's copyrighted every way that it could be spelled or said because of Frankenstein. And so there wasn't a way we could use that name. And so when we found that out, it kind of shot it, because it was a whole concept based around Frankenstein, the character. And so I just decided, there it is right there. I just decided to close it because we couldn't do anything with it other than have it in that spot. It was in a very small area right next to Sutter's, which had previously been a watch shop. So it was probably 6 feet wide by 30 feet long, something like that. But it worked fine for the concept we had, but that was all there was going to be to it. So we discontinued that.
Now, where did you come up with Frankenstein's for it?
Gosh, I don't know. It had to be late one night. We were going to serve hot dogs, so Frank, and then beer.
Yeah.
So Frankenstein, that was kind of where it came from.
You know, you said a few minutes ago that you kind of got to a point in your life where you had to decide whether you were going to continue trying to pursue rock and roll or start a business. and obviously you made the business choice and decided to open your own places. But when you look back now, all these years later, do you ever have any regrets, or you feel like you did the right thing at that time?
Yeah, I don't look back, and I'm not sorry. I think it all worked out for the best all the way around. You know, the rock and roll business is a great one, but it's tough. And at the time that I left, we weren't really accomplishing a lot. We were kind of spinning our wheels. We were in one of those cycles where just wasn't a lot going on, and I missed it, and I knew I would. But at the same time, you know, it's a lot of effort, hard work, and time, and you really can't do anything else while you're doing it. So I just felt like I needed to move on and, you know, find the greener grass. So,
yeah. Well, and obviously, I think most would say you made a great decision because you had a very successful run as a business person and did very well. And talk to me a little bit about the idea of starting as a restaurant. Was that something that was the restaurant business the way you really would have preferred to go and it just evolved into a nightclub, or is that the goal all along?
At that time, Dan, discotheques were just hitting in the country. And the latest concept of discotheques happened to be restaurants and discotheques. And we had bought all of our sound equipment from a company out of Chicago. And we'd gone up there 2 or 3 times to decide exactly what we wanted. And in visiting there, we went to 2 or 3 different very successful establishments, which were restaurants and discotheques. So we felt like that ought to have an attraction here. And actually it did. But I think what happened was we had a menu that was pretty upscale. It was, you know, lobster and steak, high-end steak. And, you know, it was a very white tablecloth type of operation. And that worked fine with the disco for a while with the town people. The college people really only on special occasions, I think, could afford to come in and eat, which, you know, was part of it. But once the college scene developed downtown, as it did, I think it kept people who had that money to spend on the food from coming into that area. You know, there was a lot of rowdiness on the street, and, you know, they just had a bad conception of it, which deservedly or not, they had. And it intimidated them from coming out to eat. So we saw that after about 3 years, we saw that we were having a conflict. And it was kind of at that point, so what do we do? So we downscaled our menu and continued on with still a restaurant and discotheque. And we went on with that for another 3 or 4 years. And then we really further downgraded the menu because there were so many college students that we wanted to cater to them. And, you know, you don't need to take up all that space for food if you're not going to be serving a lot of it. So anyway, we transitioned more into a straight discotheque and bar.
Well, and as any good business does, you followed what your audience at that time and your crowd was desiring.
Yeah, it wasn't a decision that we made. It was a decision that the customers made. So
yeah.
Worked out fine, and we were tickled with it. We actually, in about 83, 84, we had another concept that we put up in the front part of the building, which was called Captain John's Tavern. And it was a barbecue, smoked ribs and that kind of a thing. And it worked pretty good. It really did. And it was fairly compatible with the back. College students could afford to come in and eat, and it all worked fine. But once again, the overwhelming college majority, and I say college, I mean, maybe that's a misconception, but it was the younger element, which
the young people,
really, it dictated what we did, and we just finally dropped food almost all together. We always had a grill out on our patio. We had a large patio with a grill. We always had that, but other than that, we pretty much got out of serving food.
When you look back, I remember at Sutter's, I remember always a DJ, but was there ever a time did you guys do live music at any point while you had Sutter's, or was it a combo, or was it mostly DJs?
A little bit. I had Exile there. They came in 2 or 3 times and played. And I would have maybe, special entertainment from time to time, but it wasn't anything regular, and it was only something special.
Yeah, when you look back, and we talked a little bit about this last hour with Morgan and David, but in your mind, what were some of the things that made Jay Sutter's the kind of iconic place? A lot of people talk about Sutter's when you see them. Oh, Sutter's and the dog. They remember. What were some of the reasons you think it kind of has that legacy?
Yeah, and both I thought were great places. We were in different markets basically. We were very strict about age admission, and early on you couldn't get in if you weren't 21, and so we always tried to maintain that age level as long as we could. And at a certain point, it got to where we couldn't because everyone in town was letting 18s in, which was legal at the time as long as they didn't drink, which you couldn't keep them from it when they got in. But we had a really nice promotion campaign. We had newsletters every month that we put out that detailed all of our activities and promotions coming up. We had a great sound system. I mean, it was top of the line, and we had a subscription service out of New York, which sent us the disco songs before they were ever released. So you could actually come to Sutter's and hear a disco song, maybe by the Bee Gees or Wild Cherry or whoever, and then later hear it on the radio. So we were kind of ahead of the game with music, and we were all about that. At a certain point, and I see they put a screen up with our poster, we went to a video concept. So we put large video screens in. We had 8 or 10 monitors, and everything we played was off of the video, and this was tied in with MTV. So MTV provided basically the programming. We got the videotapes from them, and then we played them. So everything we played also had a video to accompany it. So you could watch the music, and as that poster said, you can see the music, hear the music, and feel the music. So that was a really good concept for us. And we actually had a live camera. So we would take crowd shots and put it up on the screens. And we actually would take the camera out on weekends and go up through campus and have everybody wave and then play it back during the week at Sutter's the next week. So we kind of had a video concept going that it was actually the first video club in the state.
I was going to say, I remember Jay Sutter's being way ahead of the game on the video piece because I don't remember anybody else doing it even for a while after you guys started it. You were the only ones doing it.
It really went well. And actually, we had MTV sent Alan Hunter, who is still one of their VJs. He's a DJ now because it's on radio, but he was a VJ at that time. And he came in and we did a huge promotion that was actually carried live on, was it Centel? Was that the cable company?
Yeah.
I believe it was Centel. And they actually had a couple of markets. I'm not sure. Maybe it was Winchester and Richmond and somewhere else maybe. And they televised this live on their channel, on their cable channel. So we got a lot of notoriety out of that because that really tied in with the concept we were presenting at that time.
Oh yeah, with the videos. And of course, I can remember when video music, the videos for music was just starting and when it was really taking off and MTV first started and TBS had a show where they played videos, even maybe before MTV started. I can't remember what it was called, but TBS was kind of a nationwide TV. It still is today, but they had like on the weekends, they had a video show where you could see music videos.
Yeah, they did. And that was very popular at that time. It was the new concept. And so we were fortunate to capture that. And, we had a lot of promotions going on. One Halloween, we bought a hearse and gave it away as a prize for the best costume. And a funny story about that, we found the hearse down in Owensboro. And my brother and I went down to get it. And so we're driving back on the parkway. I'm driving the hearse. And we're driving back on the parkway. And I keep hearing something kind of knocking in the back. and it had a window in it, and I would kind of turn around and look, and I didn't see anything, but it just kept doing it. And ever so often it would just bump, bump, and I'm thinking, this is freaking me out. And I mean, I'm not one to be afraid of ghosts, but I thought it might be the real deal here. So finally, I pulled off, and Kenny said, my brother said, what's the matter? Something wrong with the van? I said, there is something in the back of this thing. And he said, you're kidding. I said, no. So we opened it up and looked real closely, and we finally found an empty Coke bottle that was, I guess, rolling back and forth when I would hit a bump or whatever, and it was hitting the back wall, and that was causing that knocking thump. And I was never so relieved in all my life to find that Coke bottle.
You thought you bought a haunted hearse.
I thought so, yeah. So, but we gave that hearse away, and the fellas that won it, I remember they had it around town for several years thereafter. I remember seeing it. So, but another promotion that we had was we did some pretty big April Fool's jokes. So this was one of them, and we advertised that we were going to be filming for 60 minutes. Now the key word there was for 60 minutes, which was 1 hour. But we were going to be filming for 60 minutes, a documentary on discotheques in America. And we did a lot of promotion and advertising for it. And the day of we parked a Winnebago out front and had a big CBSI logo in the front windshield, great big one. So I think people started saying, man, I think, this is the real deal. So we told everybody, wear colorful clothing, because we're going to be filming. And actually, we tied this in with the EKU radio and TV department, and they sent their film crew down as a practice or a training to actually film this. It wasn't a telecast anywhere, but it was for their benefit. So we had cameras all over the place, and handheld cameras, and they were interviewing people and all like this, and everybody was just sure that this was 60 minutes. We had a fella who was dressed as a producer, and he would stop everybody dancing. Okay, stop. Or would stop, and they would get another wide angle shot or whatever. Then they'd start dancing again. We did that. We played it to the hilt all night. And at the end of the night, the producer said, you all have been a great crowd, and we really appreciate everything you've done, and we've got a special message for you. And they had a great big scroll that one guy got on one end and the other on the other, and they unrolled it on the stage, and it said, Happy April Fool. And I've never heard so many boos, hisses, beer cans flying through the air and everything in all my life. And it was, I got so many compliments on it after it happened that, I mean, it was just a great fun night, but unfortunately it was a fool night, So but we like to do things like that. And we had a suitcase giveaway one night where everybody brought a suitcase in. We had a whole patio full of suitcases, by the way, where people had brought their suitcase, and we gave away a trip that actually left the next day to go to the Bahamas for 3 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so we drew, and the people won it and took off and went to the Bahamas and came back. And so we like to do things like that and just, make it fun and interesting and entertaining.
You mentioned you had Alan Hunter there, and I still hear Alan Hunter on the radio on the 80s on 8 on Sirius XM, Were there ever any other celebrities or any other famous people that you had come through there?
Well, yeah, we tied in somewhat with Skip Daugherty at Eastern, and when concerts there, we had a standing offer that if they came down to the mill after it was over, that we would pick up their tab and usually fix a meal for them. And so Jimmy Buffett was there, Kool and the Gang was there. I don't know, there were several people who played at Eastern that came in and, had a drink or so after it was over, and everybody, kind of socialized with them. So yeah, we had several people like that.
It's funny because, and of course, Skip, was in student activities forever and had so many different acts in over this, particularly in the 70s and 80s, that a lot of people don't even realize.
Well, Eastern was really the concert venue of Central Kentucky before Rupp Arena opened too. Mm-hmm. And even after they opened, he still had the contacts with all the promoters. So when a large show would come to town, for instance, as we were speaking the other night, Dick Clark Canavan Stars, that came to Eastern. Didn't go to Lexington. It came to Eastern. And Skip really had connections with all those promoters. And I think he still does with the Art Center. He still knows, how to get the acts.
Yeah, he's got a great story about when Bob Hope came to Eastern. You should get him to tell you that sometime. I won't get into it now, but it's a great story. Yeah. Let's talk about, again, this is the one I get asked a lot, is where did the name come from? Why J. Sutter's Mill?
Well, J. Sutter's Mill is where gold was discovered in California. And so we wanted a rustic theme. And we actually tore down a barn that was partially demolished during the tornado of, I think, 74. And we tore the rest of the barn down and got all the barn wood out of it and the beams. They had hand-hewn chestnut beams that were about 100 years old in there. We put those up in the building. So we wanted something rustic, and that name tied in. We thought, hey, the mill, that's kind of got a catch to it. So that's where we got it. Yeah.
You mentioned 13 bars, I think you said, college bars in a small area. We know Sutter's was on one corner. O'Reilly's is across the street. The Dog was just down around the corner. What were some other places that you remember from that era that people frequented to?
Well, you had on First Street, you had the Talk of the Town, you had the Water Hole, you had Phone 3, you had I think it was the 1890s at that time. You had I don't remember the names of all of them, but you had all those bars. There were probably 10 bars on First Street. Yeah. So you just had a drawing card. And I really think had only one bar been there, I don't think you'd have had all that attraction from out of town. But, you could park your car in one spot and basically walk around all these places and never have to get back in your car. I mean, there was a real attraction there. And, and certainly, the people from out of town liked it because it was so convenient.
Yeah. And obviously they kept coming back. I mean, and we talked about it, even though there were so many different places, there really wasn't, you were competing with each other, but it was always friendly competition because there were typically enough people to go around for everybody.
There were, I think everybody had their own approach. And, I don't think anybody ever stepped on anybody's toes, at least not much. And everybody pretty much got along. We had bar owner meetings from time to time, and everybody would sit down in a civil manner and discuss things. So, we really, I thought, all worked well together. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you guys, when you got out of Sutter's, you guys kept Gold Rush for several years after that, didn't you?
We did. I don't know how long after that, but for a while, yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever miss having Sutter's, or were you? I mean, I know, and Jeff Gillum's told me this several times, that he loves having a bar, but it's exhausting.
Well, it kind of got to where I couldn't stay up that late anymore. It was a blast while it lasted, but we were there 18 years, and it just really got, a little old, and it got to where certain nights I just didn't get the energy to even want to go down there. It was just, I don't know, more of the same. I actually met my wife there and had gotten married, and it's not much of a life for a married person. And so I made another decision, and that was to do something else, a little more traditional. And so I got into the food service business and stayed there until I retired 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. And you had great success there too. I mean, that you've made some good decisions over the years, and you've been able to enjoy. I mean, to be able to be in a rock band and own a nightclub. I mean, you've had a pretty interesting life to this point.
It has been never a dull moment, I can tell you.
And we talked about Monday night. You're writing a book about the early days of exile, right?
I am, and I'm close to finishing it. I'm just trying to be very careful because I'm basically describing history, and I want to make sure it's correct. But I've almost got it finished, so I'm down to the final stages, and I hope in the next few months I'll have it finished. Yeah, but it's been fun writing it, just trying to remember everything, and talk to a lot of people along the way who have shared their memories. So it's been fun.
It's funny. We used to joke about the number of people in Madison County who, when you'd bring up exile or the exiles, they would it seemed like everybody would say, "Oh, they used to practice in my garage." Everybody had some connection to the exiles.
Yeah,
back in the day.
You'd be surprised at how many people I hear that said they played drums with Exile. Actually, only one guy who played drums, but we hear that fairly often. I heard it not long ago that somebody's uncle played drums with Exile, and so we were a local band and knew everybody, and people would feel free to come to our practices at certain points, and so it was like family, being here in town, as was the bar business. I mean, we had a big family at Sutter's. The dog had a big family. O'Reilly's had a big family, and everybody got along and went back and forth, and it was a great time.
We have one of our viewers tonight who asked if you remember Luther, who used to hang around the liquor store. Does that ring a bell to you?
Yeah, absolutely. He was, there are these town characters. Buckhorn was one.
Buckhorn.
Yeah, and Luther was another one. So there were several local characters. Popsicle at the pool room. Do you remember him?
I've heard of Popsicle. I don't remember him.
You're a little or late for that, but Twig was Twig Richardson, and so Luther.
Now Twig made barbecue. I mean, I've had some of his cooking before. He was a heck of a cook.
Really?
Twig. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know he did barbecue. He worked at the pool room, and he was everywhere. He was all over town. I mean, that guy, he probably walked 15 miles a day. I don't think he ever drove. He just walked everywhere. But there were a lot of those characters.
When I was in radio, of course, Buckhorn had been on radio back in the 60s with John Sullivan and Man on the Street and all of that. And so when I was in radio several years after that, we brought Buckhorn back, and he would come in and spend a little time with me and Kyle Sowers in the morning back in the late 90s. Yeah, I've got a lot of good Buckhorn stories, as anybody who knew him.
Yeah. What a character.
Well, and Buckhorn made his living by cleaning a lot of the downtown bars after they would close.
Yes, he did. I think he cleaned all of them on First Street at one point. Yeah. He was a good
he was, and you're right. We have a lot of those characters through the many years. So talking about Sutter's, looking back, as you think about the success, what do you think it was that really made it a success? And we talked about how people remember it, but do you think it was the key that you promoted it well and you were able to get the name out and make it fun for people?
Yeah, I think so. We tried to always run a reputable operation, and we did our best to accommodate everybody who came in, and we tried to make it a nice, clean, safe place to come. And, from time to time, if somebody had too much to drink, we wouldn't serve them anymore, and we kept the trouble down. We had very little trouble. And so I think it was a comfortable place. People could come in and relax and enjoy themselves and have a good time. And I think that probably is as much as anything responsible. But once again, we tried to always have something going on, something different going on. In fact, one time we had we said we're building an Olympic-sized pool out back, and we're going to have a grand opening here soon. Well, you would think people would say, well, there's nothing going on out back, However, the night we said it's going to be the grand opening of our Olympic-sized swimming pool. And, everybody wears a swimming suit, gets in free. Let me tell you, we let about everybody in free that night because everybody comes in a bathing suit. we said, okay, now at 10 o'clock, we're going to open the door and everybody can go swimming. So at 10 o'clock, we opened the back patio door, and our patio was probably, 20 by 30 feet or whatever. And we opened the back door, and there's a rush to the back door for the Olympic swimming pool. And there they are on the patio in their bathing suits. So anyway, we just did things like that to keep interest and have a good time, have fun. That's what it was all about.
Was there a signature drink or a particular special that Sutter's was known for?
Well, we had a jar drink that was actually served in a empty Tropicana juice quart jar, and it was called a zombie. And we got to where we were making so many of those that it was there were 5 different liquors in it, and several juices. And it got to where we were making so many, it was taking so much of the bartender's time that in the afternoon we had the bar manager pre-mix those. And the first day, there you go, zombies right there. The first day that we did it, I think we did 40, and we ran out of those in about an hour. So it got to where we were making like 60 and 70 of those an afternoon and had them ready. And then all we had to do was just pour the juice in them and put ice in them and serve them. So that was a very popular drink for us. And the Long Island teas that you see there also were as popular, maybe not quite as big, but they were popular also. So we had the quart jar drinks, and we got those we used Tropicana orange juice. So when we emptied the orange juice, we kept the empty jar and put the mixed drinks in them. So we didn't have any expense on the glasses.
Yeah. We had one viewer tonight who says that she remembers Roy Kidd's son being one of your DJs. And I don't know if it was Mark. Was that Mark?
He sure was. And he was a great one. He had a winning personality. And on Wednesday nights, we had a promotion called the Great Kentucky Miniskirt Review. And Mark emceed those. And basically what that was, that was a parade of girls in miniskirts who all got on stage, and they had maybe, I don't know, a minute or so, and they could dance and swirl around or whatever. And then there was a vote taken from the whole audience on who won it, and they got a prize of some sort. And Mark Kidd did that emceeing. He was a great MC. Yeah.
Well, Mark, he was great in radio. He worked in radio here, and obviously he's gone on and been great in media in general. There was another comment there, someone asking and said, didn't Sutter's have the first karaoke in Richmond?
Yeah, I saw Angela. I said, hi, Angela. I haven't seen her from you in a long time. Yes, we did. We had the first karaoke in Kentucky. And when we got it, no one knew what it was. Couldn't pronounce it or had any idea what in the heck that was. And so we kind of educated everybody. And we really found that the best application for that was in a mobile form. So we had Jay Sutter's mobile music machine, which was a mobile disco. And
I remember that. Now that you say it, I remember hearing Jay Sutter's mobile music machine. We did a lot of fraternity
sorority events, a lot of high school proms, different things, because at that time, live music, unfortunately, had kind of taken a dive, mainly because of the disco movement. And bands were just, crying for places to play because a lot of places discontinued live entertainment and went with pre-recorded, which was disco. So we took that equipment around and played, for 2 or 3 years, and it was busy every weekend. And so when we got the karaoke, we did it at Sutter's a few times, but it broke the flow up too much of what we were doing at Sutter's. So we pretty much put that on the mobile end and booked it out for some large events. We played for some big events in Louisville, at the Galt House for the Kentucky Association of Administrators, where they had 700-800 people. We did some big events with that, and that was very successful for several years too. Yeah, but it was a really great concept.
When you look back and think about all the different things that you've done, and obviously you try to change with the times and keep with what was currently, in fashion or in style or whatever. But the music was just the driving force typically, wasn't it? Whether it was the videos or the DJ or whatever, the music is what brought the people in, I would think.
It was always the music. That's right. And I love the music. So it was my way of staying in music without being in it.
Yeah.
It was music. It was all music driven.
Well, and a big part of that, and we talk about Mark being a DJ, but the big part of that has got to be a DJ who is good and who can keep the crowd into it and keep it going. And those aren't always easy to find.
Yeah, and those guys were at a premium. You're right. I never heard David from the Dog, but I'm sure he was very capable as well. But there weren't many of those guys that they blended songs together. And the beats per minute of the song was how you really had to segue into the next song so that you didn't ever lose the dance beat. You kept that steady dance beat. And the turntables then actually had variable speed controls on them so that if one wasn't quite the same tempo as the other one, you could match it. You could speed it up a little or maybe slow it down a little. So you could keep the dance floor going. So it took a really talented person, number one, to do that. And number two, to know the songs that they needed to play to keep people out on the floor, because our main objective was to keep the dance floor full every song all night. Impossible and difficult, but we tried.
Yeah. And as somebody who used to DJ dances, I know, and there was nothing worse than when you were on a roll and you had everybody on the floor and then you put a song on and vroom, they all just go off. Yeah,
that's right. And you'd lose the floor and it was hard to get them back. Because particularly in a bar, once they get off the floor, they stray off in different directions, and it's hard to build the floor back up. So the guys who could keep the full dance floor were very talented, and I admired them. We had 2 or 3 guys that were just phenomenal. And, Philip Todd, I don't know if you know him, but he was at the top of the heap. But we had others that were great too. So.
And I talked a little bit about this. The Dog is still standing and hasn't really basically changed a whole lot from the day they shut the doors. And with Sutter's being gone, I mean, obviously you could reflect and be sad about it, but are you disappointed that it's not there anymore, or are you just happy that you were able to be part of it?
No, yeah. I mean, it was what it was, and things can't go on forever. So it didn't bother me when I sold it and I knew they were going to turn it into a post office operation. So, just one of those things, you just have to move on and look forward, so.
Well, and you said it, I mean, that lifestyle is for a younger person. Typically it's not, the older you get,
Right. Yeah. I don't know about Robbie, but I couldn't do it anymore. It just, it drains you. There's a lot going on, and you're responsible for a lot, and you've got to stay on your toes. And I don't know, once you've done it for so long, to me, it just wore me out.
Yeah.
So
I can understand.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming to the end of our segment here, Billy. And I appreciate you taking your time both Monday night and being with us again tonight. As we kind of wrap up and you look back on that 1980s in the downtown Richmond, just some of your final thoughts on how things were back then and what a great time it was.
Well, I don't think that could ever be replaced. I think all the kids who were there at that time would agree. And I heard a lot of that Monday night with Specs, but those things don't last forever, and everybody moves on. And the people who enjoyed it back then probably wouldn't enjoy it now because they're married and have kids and have moved off and everything else. So it's just one of those time frame things that it is what it is. And when it's gone, it's gone. And though I enjoyed it immensely, wouldn't trade anything in the world for it, but it ran its course. And, I look at downtown Richmond and I just, downtown just doesn't have anything to offer. And I just wish, and I shouldn't say it that way. They've got, Madison Garden, they've got the Paddy Wagon, jerseys. So they do, but it's not the same as it was. And so I just really wish that maybe it was closer to what it was for the people who are in town now going to school. so that they could experience it. But I know they have their own experiences and enjoy it just fine the way it is. So it doesn't bother me, no.
Yeah, and it's like you said. I mean, times change and everything happens and evolves and it just keeps marching right on. And it's the same with the university. You know, people who were students here in the 60s and the 70s, and they remember things, and buildings get torn down and new buildings go up, and you know, time marches on. We can't stop it.
Yeah, you're right, and you can't stop it, so you might as well go with it. You know, and that's exactly what happened downtown. So that's my memory of it. Was just, you know, fabulous, and I enjoyed it while it was there, but it's gone. So I miss it, but I don't.
Yeah, amen to that.
Yeah,
and that's probably a good place for us to wrap it up tonight. Billy, again, thanks for being with us. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, thank you and the Alumni Association for putting this on. You know, I've had so many people contact me, a lot of whom I haven't heard from in years and years, and commenting about this presentation you all have. So maybe you're on to something. And I heard you mention earlier you might do similar things in the future. I think you should consider it because it's, I believe, hit a nerve with everybody.
Absolutely. And we're certainly going to look at continuing it as we move forward. And one last thing, John, I can't say it, Parvis, the bar manager, do you remember Parvis?
Parvis was from Iran. He was an Iranian, and he came to school here. And back at a certain point, they were going to basically deport all Iranians. You know, we were having a conflict with Iran, and they were going to deport them. And I called a good friend of mine who was an attorney, and he basically told us how to be able to keep him here. So we were able to do that. He was a fantastic fellow, and he was our bar manager for several years. And I know he made a lot of friends. A lot of people ask about him every time I see them. But he has gone, I think, back to Iran, but nobody knows. We're not real sure what happened to him. But the reason he fled Iran was because he was in the Shah's army. And anyone who was in the Shah's army was an enemy of Khomeini and would be arrested. So he got out of the country just in time. So he didn't want to go back because he'd be arrested when he set foot in the country. So anyway, we kept him over here. And after Sutter's closed, I heard from him a few times, and then I lost contact and have not, nor has anyone else heard from him.
Well, if anybody out there has seen Parvis, tell him we're looking for him. Billy, again.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Billy. We appreciate you being with us. And,
all right, Dan. Thank you, and Steve, both.
All right. Good deal. Billy Luxon with us tonight, talking about J. Sutter's Mill. And, of course, we appreciate everybody who has tuned in and viewed tonight. And if you have not done so yet, we ask that you go and register and let us know that you were here, alumni.eku.edu/pubcrawl. And you'll also see there where you can order one of our limited edition collector's item pub crawl t-shirts, which are available for sale there. Again, we want to remind you, too, that the week continues. We're halfway done, but we've still got the 90s and the 2000s yet to go. Tomorrow night, the 1990s, we will start at 7 o'clock and talk with Kim Billings and Carl Chapman. Now, Kim and his family owned T-Bombs, and Carl was also involved in working there and can tell us a lot about the things that went on at T-Bombs down on First Street back in the day. And in the second hour, we'll talk with Gabe Ubel, who for a period back in the 90s owned Tazwell's. And many people have asked me, when are you going to talk about Tazwell's? Well, we're doing that tomorrow night. Gabe Ubel will be on with us. And then I want to remind you, Friday night, we will have Chuck Fields and Silas Smith from the Paddy Wagon on, the first portion. And then the second portion, we will talk about jerseys with Wags and Bryson and Myantha, and that'll be a lot of fun in hour number 2. So again, thank you for joining us tonight. We hope that you will go on and register and let us know that you were here. And also, we hope that you'll come back tomorrow night when we kick off the 1990s. Our Thursday night edition begins at 7 o'clock tomorrow night right here in the same spot. Thanks for watching, and have a great night.